Who has survived season 2 of Chaos Zero Nightmare? Who is at the top now, and who is going to be good in the future? What is going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. We're going to be taking a look at the tier lists for season today, putting our thoughts in on it as far as what we think about the characters and how they are being rated now, and important information on what I think you're going to be seeing some of these characters doing better in the future. So we're taking a look at the Pride 1 tier list. It was fun last time. I'm going to put our own little spin on this. We're not going to go over all the change log and about the tier list and all that stuff today. We're going to try to keep it under like 15 minutes possibly. So let's get into it. We also see that they have a Great Rift section now, which is something we've talked about a lot on the channel, about how the Great Rift just kind of needed its own thing, not just seasonal save data, because the Great Rift is so specific on what it wants you to bring that, yeah, you can bring a couple of supports as we can see here, but really it's based around 2 or so DPS characters. So let's touch on the Great Rift here. You don't need this too much. You can just go look up the characters everyone's using in the game if you want to, but you can kind of see how they're designing the Great Rift. Hopefully they don't worry about the Great Rift designing around the entirety of the game. They talked about that in the dev notes as well, and you can see what's kind of going on here, right? We have the Cheeser Barrel, who we talked about being absolutely insane during season 2 with the Spore cards and her being able to just do a bunch of extra attacks and how they're just counted as extra attacks and were cheesy mechanics that the developers were, well, designing is here. Calliope kind of sort of doing a similar role here. And then really the only 2 DPS who were up there doing great thing, 9 and then Rita. You also had a bunch of supports to facilitate these 2 characters. And you also had a couple of people doing like the high roller Tefera DPS support type character build as well in here. And then the rest of it's just gonna be a bunch of supporters, right? All of these other characters kind of being okay. Kayron was fine for some of the Great Rift. It got punished if you were E2 or higher, but you can kind of see just how these 2 characters were above and beyond everyone else when it comes to specifically Great Rift. And I don't really have anything to say about this, that this is just obviously people pulled who was successful right out of the game and made a tier list over it. So totally fine there. As far as seasonal save data goes here, let's take a look at this. Now we have 9 as well as Serenial. I cannot agree any more harder about how good these characters were this season. Serenial really showing just how strong she is, considering a lot of the content that was designed during season 2 was anti-multi-hit, anti-Serenial type stuff, and she just doesn't really care. The partner tag here is, we talked about this before, Selena is rated specifically for being used with someone like Serenial. Absolutely insane character. When Serenial was released and we put her way up on the leaderboard before anyone even thought about putting those 2 together. All right, support here out here with Veronica. I don't really have a lot to say about a ton of this stuff. This stuff, it all looks really good. Is there any outliers that I think are kind of out of position here? Now we do need to talk about Rita here for seasonal save data. Rita kind of has like a weird thing when you're not talking about specifically like, oh, she's so good in the Great Rift because it's designed specifically around her doing that stuff. Outside of Chaos, like Rita's role is that like support DPS type character, right? She's there to facilitate her own game plan for like low AP, do free damage, do maybe some supportive elements, maybe cast some cards out of your hand, get a little bit of a discount there with some of the stuff she's doing in that way. But her role really is like a kind of a new one when it comes to characters in CZN, as far as a Yuki-ish type character, right? Where they're there, they don't really interfere with your game plan. You get a little bit of benefit out of them, and they might not be directly like being used in the game plan of your main DPS and your other support character, but they don't really get in the way of it either. And it's going to be interesting to see if maybe, you know, eventually over time we get more and more characters like Yuki, like Rita, who can just do their own thing and they don't really need a ton of support with the right build, if that role is going to become better or worse. Because the question is like, do you want 1 DPS and 2 full support type characters like Veronica giving you a bunch of card draw and consistency and some damage buffers with your 1 DPS? Or is it going to be better for you to run a character like Rita who just kind of does damage themselves, where you lose out on the supportive options of a full-on supporter in your team, buffing up the damage of your high quality big DPS character? That's going to be something we'll see in the future. If that's something the developers are more into, we don't know. But outside of everything else, that's kind of how I feel about Rita. Luke got better. Haru got better as well with all the stuff going around, right? Reducing the cost of cards in her hand, playing them over and over and over. Definitely a lot better during season 2 here. Mei Lin Listen, I mean, Mei Lin without elasticity is just by far and none, in a way, like the best character in the game, and the developers are going to have to, well, think about how they're balancing that as well. I mean, we made a lot of cool stuff with Mei Lin. There's like a build we put up that 100% of the time is like 300,000, 400,000 damage on turn one, as long as elasticity isn't there. It's absolutely insane. So this stuff I'm totally fine with out here. Nia is kind of suffering a little bit in season 2, not having access to like the Adagio stuff. Characters like Nia could be better in the future. Characters like Rita could be better in the future as well if we get more discard oriented seasons and support. That's something that we should touch on as we're talking about this. Some of these characters could get better in the future or worse. Things that we haven't really seen the developers really go in on. We've seen multi-hit, right? A big pog for season 1, big chunky hits for season 2. And Rita's kind of given us a look at her options where she has the ability to gain benefit of like discard teams, gain benefit off of exhaust teams, gain benefit off of retain teams. And I think that might be of a hint on the other future ways the developers are going to explore certain types of cards being used. That's just kind of like a theory at this point, a game theory. But as everyone knows, you have to expand your horizons when you're designing stuff, and there's certain avenues that this game hasn't really taken yet. So I expect those to be expanded on in the future. And same thing with like characters like Renoa. I like her about a lot better in season 2. I finally finished building a pretty cracked one, and she could be another future character. Like if we're in a discard season, who gets even better out there, depending on what sort of mechanics are involved in that season, as well as neutral cards that are included, partners, new characters, a bunch of discard synergies could move her up even further beyond. So all this stuff down here, yeah, dude, the defensive tanky characters ruined my girl Tressa. Owen, sure, he's got that one team where he does cool stuff because he's passion. Fine. Outside of that, I don't really find a lot of qualms with this. This is sort of like solidified. The data's finally in, and they have decent stuff and content to. What is this little bug? There's a bug right here. Can I flick it at the camera? No. He gone. But I don't really see any like crazy outliers outside of like, yeah, maybe Mei Lin's just being held back because I think everything but one boss had like elasticity in this season. So when we get to Chaos Manifestation, here is what we're going to be talking about. A bunch of cool stuff out here. 9 is in tier 0 1,000%, and I would go above and beyond to even say like in this season, and I'm talking about this one more time because this is going to be very relevant to Rita herself. 9 is in a tier of her own. I would be like tier god, like above tier 0, just because of how easy she interacts with everything going on in the season, everything being weak to her element, right? Order doing insane stuff. If you've played with 9, you know how easy it is. You use Hue, it costs 3 AP at the start. It's always basically there in your hand. All of the basic enemies with 3 tenacity gauges. You're a lot of the time doing heavy damage to them or just one-shotting them. And since you're matching the element of the enemy and using a 3 AP Hue, it takes the 3 tenacity gauge meters to 0, breaks, and gives you another AP. So it's a very, very easy way to consistently do damage, clear things, and have extra AP left over to heal at the end of the battle, cast a support card for the next turn, and just have like good tempo turns. That is what puts 9 like so far and above beyond everyone else. And Serenial is still just there. She's insane for the same reasons, right? Breaking stuff, getting that AP. That is what Serenial is very good at inside of Chaos, being able to be used everywhere and giving you that AP on break. 9 just happens to line up this season with her order element, which is also another big boon to Hugo out here. Fantastic character. Now, when it comes to supports over here, I still think Mika is a crutch if you're out here farming for Chaos Manifestation stuff. If you're like, oh man, I need to farm stuff. I need to do big damage with my characters. I need to become efficient. I think a lot of the times Mika is a crutch even on like higher tier difficulties, because you can get consistent healing out of a lot of these other characters without Mika just being there to heal with a couple of cards and provide like no other real value, right? If we're in Chaos Manifestation right now, currently you're building data for one person, you're focusing all your card removals, all of your credits that you're earning, all of the duplication off the bosses, all on one character, and your supporters a lot of the time are not getting a lot of love, which means Mika has like no real crazy cards. And you don't need a bunch of crazy stuff for her, but she doesn't really do anything. She's not in there generating a bunch of AP because you're duplicating source water and carrying your team or anything like that. That's not really the controller's role. And a lot of the time it's just heal a little bit for 0 to 1 AP and move on with your life. And Narja can do that very efficiently. You can throw Alyssa on all of these characters. That's the one that heals at the end of the battle. Narja generate her own little mechanic, her own resources. Perdition, I think, no, it's not. Narja, you generate some veracity, you heal a little bit off of that. You have like the 1 extra AP sometimes to heal off of that with a card you cast from her, and you're good. You're ready to rock and roll. If you play these like higher aggressive, more tempo teams, the better your DPS characters are, the better your support DPS characters are, the less you need to heal every time. In Narja, Hyphera, they can fill that role in quite nice, and I would knock Mika down at least 1 tier. Orlia as well as Ray, I would bump up as well. I think Narja, Tefera, Ray, and Orlia are well and above Mika. So Mika's got to be below those characters. Cassius, in my opinion, still isn't given the credit that he's due. Even on like super high difficulty ones, there is nothing better than spending 4 AP to give -3 to 5 morale to your enemies, proc the quests. 3 of the 4 quest cards, not only do they do stuff for you, like give you stacks of morale and fortitude, or do damage and heal a little bit, or just give you minus stress, they also draw you cards. So 4 AP to give -3 to -5 morale, draw probably 2 cards a lot of the times, right? A card and a half on average probably there, and do something else all for the cost of 4 EP off of his ult is insane. It's an insane thing. Joker, go find the best card for your DPS, guaranteed 100% of the time, all of the time in there. He's just super consistent. If you have him at E2, you also start gaining health off of drawing cards, and it's just a fantastic place for him to be. Don't focus too much in on him like being like, oh, I can't really complete the quests that much when I'm doing my runs with him. Sometimes I don't even cast his quest card. Most of the time I don't cast the quest card. It's just there for all of his passive abilities for him to do super cool stuff with his EP skill, heal a little bit, draw a couple cards from time to time, and get yourself out of really sticky situations. Outside of that, Maylin, she's fine. As far as like carrying your team, if you're not dedicated to duplicating her cards and doing all this other stuff, she's gonna fall down in the tier list a little bit there for you. Characters like Serenial in 9, you can put them in Chaos Manifestation when you're farming and kind of ignore them. You want to spend all of your resources building somebody else, building a support DPS, so you can get access to some finely tuned seasonal save data that way. These 2 characters are totally fine with that. You don't need to dupe a single card. You don't care what's going on. You don't like care too much about what the epiphanies are. And no other DPS character is really like that. And I get that this is a tier list and it's like, okay, these 2 characters are a tier higher because they're better. These 2 characters are so much better that unlike all these other ones, like I said, I would put 9 in her own tier, Serenial right below to that tier 0. And then like no one should be anywhere near them for like the next 2 tiers. That is how freaking good they are in comparison to like everyone else inside of season 2, because it punishes slowness. It punishes, you know, you not having the consistency to do damage and the consistency of being able to interact with mechanics and hit them hard and hit specific HP breakpoints a lot of the times. In a lot of the other DPS, unless you're focusing on building them consistently every single time, making sure they get some of the correct epiphanies like you would want to with characters like Maylin and Haru and Rin, and even like Chizuru, even though I think Chizuru should be in support DPS, they just don't even compare to these 2 whatsoever. I don't think any of these characters are particularly bad, but I would use someone like Luke over these characters inside of my Chaos Manifestation runs, because his order element really can carry you hard through just getting through the bosses and getting through and farming save data for your characters. I don't know why he's not above any of these unmatched type characters for this season of CZN. Beryl, I would probably move up a little bit, and I don't mind anyone else here. Now, Rita, I think Rita is probably fine, if not 0.5 tier higher than where she should be. Now, hear me out here. Now, Rita, I think inside of Chaos will probably always be good, especially if you're farming save data for all the reasons we just talked about. Because Rita is another character who doesn't really need a ton of attention, but can still fulfill her role, which is a support DPS inside of your runs, right? Her cards costing 3, basic attacks, very similar like a unleveled Hue. Once you have your potentials up like 400 and something% multiplier, does good damage. It's very consistent. You're going to run into it. You don't need to remove it from your deck. It doesn't feel like a bad card to draw. You're able to do it for free as well because of her mechanic. Her mechanic, the chronal mechanic, is really what allows her to fulfill that support DPS function. She's just a character who's not getting in the way of you doing anything. And that's a fantastic thing because the way that Rita doesn't get in your way is she tries to not cost you any AP. So you can use all of your AP on your support stuff, all your AP on your DPS stuff if you want, maintain that flexibility and have some tempo with that free damage that she's bringing you from all of the cards that you're casting. Now, why would I move her down to like tier 1 instead of like tier 0.5? Because a lot of the time right now, if you're using some of these higher DPS characters, because they're so good, the higher tiered DPS characters like 9 and Serennial, it doesn't really matter if you're doing that or not compared to just bringing another support. Like it doesn't matter if I'm using Rita over like Veronica or Narja or Tefera or whatever. She's not like that much better. I would move her down to tier 1. She's not making my runs that much better. However, in the future, everything we just talked about why 9 is good, having access to a 3-cost card with Hue, right? It being an order element weak chaos manifestation zone right now, the payoff you get for being able to take out an enemy, like just a normal random run-of-the-mill enemy throughout the entirety of your chaos run, hit them with a Hue, break them and get another AP back, is going to be what Rita is probably more than likely going to be able to do as soon as we get a chaos manifestation where a bunch of the enemies are weak to justice element. Her basic cards costing 3 are going to hit relatively hard, and because they cost 3, once we get into that justice weak chaos, you're going to be able to do all of the same stuff we're doing with 9 right now with Rita, and she's going to probably become like one of the best characters to run if you don't want to think about what's going on inside of a Justice Week chaos. So look forward to that, particularly unless they do a bunch of weird stuff where it's like the enemies have shields and they don't take tenacity damage if they have shields because they introduced a new mechanic and they want to prove me wrong. But I suspect her to be even better in the future. The rest of the characters down here, like I said, the only one really that's like an outlier to me is Luke. I think Luke is probably a lot better in this seasonal chaos than what they're giving him credit for, and this is someone who memes on Luke a lot. And Amir as well, also being order element, number 1. Number 2, she also interacts with the like punishing mechanics of the seasonal chaos bosses right now, where they charge up a little bit and they're like, hey, I'm gonna hit you really hard, and then it hits really hard. A lot of the times, especially on some of the higher difficulty ones, it's like, oh man, if I had one more turn, I would be okay. The boss just has a little bit more HP, just does a little bit too much damage. And Amir's ultimate card that just reduces the damage you take by an astronomical amount gives you that 1 or 2 extra turns that you need to get through the boss, to take less damage so you could heal up effectively, all at the cost of like 1 AP. And she can also like do decent damage as well. Being defense based works well with a lot of the cards and seasonal content gear, etc. And I think she is much better than tier 2 here, especially if you're a new player, you get her for free. You should probably be trying to find a spot in there. You don't have to make her your all-star. Use like a mirror and then like a controller of your choice, and then like a support DPS or DPS of your choice, and you'll find her doing a lot of work for you there. I don't know why they continue to sleep on how good she can be with the low amount of effort we keep talking about putting into a character's save data when farming, kind of being ignored and getting a lot of value out of Amir. She can still do that for you quite well there. So for the future, I imagine Rita will move up, and a lot of the stuff obviously is going to change. Sharenia will probably stay tier 0 no matter what chaos. I'm looking forward to seeing Rita get a little bit better. If you've been finding Rita useful in your chaos runs, let me know down below. I'm going to be branching out a little bit more. We'll be looking at some other gachas coming out in the future, ones that just released, as well as ones coming out in April. We'll have like a timeline thing for you set up there, what to be looking out for, and just reviews for other stuff as well. If you want to see that, make sure you come back here. Till then, God bless, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.